Hey everyone, Marilyn Hughes from the Out of Body Travel Foundation, live with your questions. Reminders, everyone, to please subscribe to the channel, keeps us searchable. Please give us a thumbs up if you like our videos. That also really helps us to help us show up on YouTube and across the web. Also, becoming a member helps us to keep our content free to everyone across the internet. And you can find our material, my books, and all of our films and things that we have available for free at outofbodytravel.org and now also outofbodytravel.wordpress.com. So you have several locations you can go to check out what we have available. So check that out. So let's get started. So our first question is this. After going through a spiritually dry spell, my dreams and OBEs have been more frequent recently, and I have an OBE question I think you can help with. Beginning at one of my last travels, I felt the vibrations like normal, and before long, the spiritual whirlwind took over and settled. This experience, I didn't travel to a specific location or even awake to my bedroom. It was dark, and I could hear whispering chatter all around me. The voices weren't loud, and no one was yelling. I decided to interact with my thoughts and say something like, well, hello, who's there? Then all of a sudden, a voice replied, and it was deliberately up close in my ear. Help us. The whisper felt so real that it startled me. My body jolted and woke me back to reality. Have you ever experienced something of this nature? My guess is maybe I found myself in a lower hell realm or something. Thank you for all your wisdom, educational videos, and keep up the awesome work. And my answer to that is, of course, yes, I have many times. And I've heard of many people who have also experienced this. You could have found yourself in a lower hell realm, or a purgatory. However, it's more likely that you could have found yourself surrounded by lost souls. And that is actually more likely the culprit. But any of those three could be the case. But when you have a situation like that, the thing I'd like to point out, because a lot of people have this experience, is you want to remember the first thing to start doing is praying for those souls. They're asking for help. They need help to move forward from wherever they are coming from. And so you want to start with praying for those souls. And that is how you get started. And sometimes that will also instigate further spiritual experience that will show you more about their situation, their status, and what actual help they need from you, or what particular prayer they might need. Sometimes people need masses offered or said for them. And so it can be more information to come on those experiences. But oftentimes you're dealing with ghosts and lost souls when you have a situation like that. The second most likely option would be the purgatorial spirits rather than actually the lower hell realm. And so that is what I would have to say about that one. Let me take another one that's not a real lengthy one, because I have two pretty lengthy questions that I want to answer today. And I'll leave those for last. So here we have another question. It says, hi, Marilyn. How do you feel at the moment? I'm trying to understand if the jittery feeling I'm experiencing is universal, if it's just my own life. My feelings are swaying towards universal. However, it could also be that at this moment, I feel a little disconnected from spiritual energy and philosophy. But I was interested in your feelings and if you yourself feel anything strange on a universal scale. Anyway, keep up the good work. You surely are one in millions. And my answer is, it kind of leans towards spiritual desolation, which a lot of people are experiencing right now. But I said, I think what you're feeling is probably a little bit of both, which is both personal and universal. There's been a lot of movement in the cosmic vibration of the planet, but that is regularly going back and forth. So we can feel that shifting, definitely, absolutely. But it's always happening because this is a mortal sphere and it's always kind of going back and forth, up and down, and we feel that. But that's normal. What I think you may be experiencing is something called spiritual desolation. It's a very common aspect of the spiritual life, which affects all of us at different spiritual points. It's when the highs of the experiences tend to wane and we suddenly feel very empty, desolate, and we feel like we're losing our way. Ironically, however, it doesn't mean that we're losing our way at all, as this is totally normal. It's very uncomfortable, however. None of us like it when we are experiencing it. St. John of the Cross spoke of the deepest depths of it in the dark night of the soul. But we go through various levels of desolation throughout our spiritual journey, and this is normal and to be expected. You can also, there's a priest, Father Timothy Gallagher, who does quite a bit of work with St. Ignatius of Loyola on the discernment of spirits and speaks a great deal about spiritual desolation. And in his work on the discernment of spirits, you can get a lot of guidance on the subject. While you're going through spiritual desolation, it can be harder to focus on the spiritual life, your spiritual goals. You lose interest for a time. You can just feel very about it all. Sometimes there is a borderline depression type feeling with it. All of this is very typical. You just totally lose interest. Everything feels just empty to you. You know, in the writings of the saints, you see it written about through all the ages, through all the cultures, faiths, and mystic traditions. I personally have gone through many of these throughout the past 4 decades. And the best thing to try to do is not worry about it too much and try to remain as steady in your practices as you can through it. And that's a difficult thing to do because you have to be very disciplined in order to pull that off. If you remain disciplined in your spiritual practice during this time, it's very good. It will be harder to do it because the spiritual consolations we're used to receiving are withdrawn. So we don't feel any of the consolations, the sensible feelings that come with it that, usually drive us towards this. And we feel completely different. So it's harder to do it. They're withdrawn in part because we have to start getting used to being a vessel of service without requiring the constant upliftment of the Holy Spirit to remain steady. It's kind of like going from childhood to adulthood in our spiritual life. It's totally normal. We go through the ebbs and flows of these energies in the spiritual life, the spiritual training that we're put through, and our spiritual practice. The goal over a long period of time is that we can remain steady and true, faithful, no matter the circumstance. That's where, you hear about like the great saints who were able to remain faithful even under some of the most horrific circumstances, where they were able to maintain their joy. This understanding at the great apex of it, the great discipline of this, where the spiritual practice is perfected to such a great level that the soul is literally able to live it no matter what is going on. They live in this presence of God no matter how desolate their surroundings are. St. Paul spoke of giving the people milk as if they were babes, but that he also had much meat to give them. But what he was giving us was milk as if we were babies. But he had this meat that he wanted to give to us when we were ready. And this is the deeper spiritual life that comes. And part of the way we reach it is through these spiritual desolations, these different changes that we go through in the spiritual life. And that's what's happening. We're becoming capable of receiving deeper and richer foods of the spirit. The meat and the milk can be compared to levels of frequency and vibration. So during spiritual consolation, it's a very good time to have humble, honest conversations with God. These are the times for soul reflection and the time for purification. The spiritual path is always a turning towards God, a continual transformation of things yet unpurified, a movement of that which remains forward, and allowing your vessel further transformative movement, which can only come of itself, not from anything you might say or do. In other words, let the process happen. Sometimes that's the hardest thing for us to do. And so let me see. I have this little thing blocking my screen over here. Hello, John. Welcome. And Aniel. Sorry, I was having computer issues. Hey, everyone. Hello, John. Hello, Aniel. Thank you for joining me, and everyone else who's out there that I can see. Feel free to jump in the chat room here. This is your question, so jump in and ask away. So, moving into some of these other questions here. Let me get to the beginning of this one. Like I said at the beginning, I have two longer questions that I wanted to save here wanted to do the shorter ones first. Now we're going to go to the longer ones and see. Okay. So I have to go from the back to the front when I'm dealing with one of these. So this is okay, I'm just working and trying to increase my presence in the spiritual world as always. Another topic for your consideration, as usual, strange and esoteric. This is pretty long and profound, at least to me, so you don't have to hurry with a reply, or you can come back to it when you feel you have a good answer. Is it possible that some secular music can be sacred and have spiritual effects on some people? Reason I ask is my favorite rock band of all time is Genesis. There are a few songs they have which have a profound effect on my soul. The lyrics are like sacred scripture to me. The music stirs my soul, and I feel as if listening to these songs moves me closer to having an out-of-body experience. They also speak to different periods and experiences of my lifetime. So in this case, he feels that music is actually speaking to him personally. Heat Haze, I think is the name, describes my entry into this world in 1978 and the lifelong discovery that this world has a lot of problems and hardships. The lines of this song sum up my conclusion that I don't fit on planet Earth. I am ill-equipped to deal with it, and this is not where I'm supposed to be. I just have to keep going with my appointed tasks and lessons to learn. And so we're going to go through a few lyrics with this person. This is from Genesis, and it's called Heat Haze, I believe, because it's all one word, so it could be Heath Haze or Heat Haze, but that's what we've got here. So in talking about this, I will go into my answer later, but I want to give you a little bit of it before we go into the lyrics. One of the things I talk about a lot is mystical language. We see mystical language in both ancient sacred texts. We see it in these mystical theology texts that are over here that you can't see on screen, but they're over to my right. We see it in the writings of a lot of mystical saints. And this is the language that mystics will go into when they're having mystical experiences, and they speak a different language. And a lot of times people on the ground don't understand it, And so we see that very deeply, like in the writings of a St. Catherine of Siena, or let me just take a look over here, St. Hildegard von Bingen, St. John of the Cross. I'm trying to think of the ones that seem to really confound a lot of people that I try to have them read these in particular. Meister Eckhart is one that really confounds people. Jacob Boehme really speaks in entirely mystical language. And so, what we have with mystical theology are these mystical theologians who are literally trying to translate mystical language to those of us on the ground so that we can understand it. Now, what we see in some of these bands, some of them in the 70s and early 80s, were that some of them were touching into some mystical language, not the depths of a St. Catherine of Siena or these types of things, but they were touching into something. And so that's what this person is asking about. So I want you to listen to some of these lyrics that we'll touch over with that eye, with that ear. Mystical language. Take it and take yourself on that journey to where they are taking you, because when they're writing this, they're touching into a mystical sphere in order to bring this into being. And they are doing that. Art and artistry, whether it's writing, like I do, whether it's painting, whether it's music like this, or other types of inspired music, which there's a lot out there, as we know, can be inspired from the above, in the mystical spheres. And there are types of music that can be inspired from the below, things that actually drag people down into darker energies. And so what this person is talking about are certain artists that did go into some of these higher concepts, and we're bringing in this mystical language. I do want to emphasize, however, that they're touching into mystical spheres, and these are really, really awesome gifts. They're really awesome gifts, but don't confuse them like with a St. Catherine of Siena, because there's different levels, different gradations of that, and they are different, and they are, what a St. Catherine of Siena is experiencing, what kind of level of mystical language, what she's touching into is so much higher. However, it does not minimize the value and the gift of what these people also were given to bring in for their purpose. And so that's important. So here we go with heat haze is what I'm going to go with. No cloud, a sleepy calm, sun-baked earth that's cooled by gentle breeze, and trees with rustling leaves, only endless days without a care. Nothing must be done. Silent as a day can be, far off sounds of others on their chosen run. As they do all those things they feel give life some meaning, even if they're dull. It's time to stop this dreaming, must rejoin the real world as revealed by orange lights and a smoky atmosphere. I want to point out as I'm going here, as I read these, I go into them and I know what they're touching into. I know these things of which they speak. And I want you to do the same thing. So they're talking here. It's time to stop this dreaming, must rejoin the real world as revealed by orange lights and a smoky atmosphere. This is very specifically speaking of coming back from the mystical spheres, coming into the grounded reality, which you do experience as these particular colors and a smoky haze. This is very, very clear to someone who is a mystical traveler that this is, I have to return to earth. Now here I'm going a little bit backwards, so work with me. Silent as a day can be. He's speaking of himself as the mystic traveler. Far off sounds of others on their chosen run. That's the mystic traveler hearing all these different echoes of these multiplicitous existences in the mystical spheres and in the below, which is the earthly sphere, the physical capacities, physical bodies, human beings. He's hearing them, their chosen run. As they do all those things, they feel give life some meaning. Now he's speaking about the karmic circling, the constant pull of human beings to try to find meaning in the karmic circling when they're not getting it. And then he says, even if they're dull, that means even if they cannot see that that's what they're doing, they're just karmic circling. If they're dull, it means they're not awake. So they cannot see that what they're doing is not going to actually inevitably bring them to true meaning. They're just karmic circling because they're dull, but they are seeking meaning. But again, we're going backwards. And we're speaking now about the mystic traveler. No cloud, a sleepy calm, sun-baked earth that's cooled by gentle breeze, and trees with rustling leaves, only endless days without a care. Nothing must be done, silent as a day can be. Nothing must be done. This is the eternal solitude of the mystic traveler. Okay, and that's just the first three stanzas of this one. And we're going to have some fun here. So now we're back here, and we had come through the part that says it's time to stop this dreaming, must rejoin the real world, and it's revealed by the orange lights and the smoky atmosphere. So let's continue, and you'll see what's happening here. The trees and I are shaken by the same wind. But whereas the trees will lose their withered leaves, I just can't seem to let them loose. I want you to think here, and maybe not even think, but meditate on this. Do you know what this means? I can't let loose my withered pasts, my withered karma. I can't let these dead things go. And they can't refresh me, those hot winds of the south. The hot winds of the south. They can't refresh me because it is the past. It is de-energized. It is just old, hot, backwards. It cannot refresh you. Oh, I feel like an alien, a stranger in an alien place. That's what our writer, the person who wrote in and asked about this, is talking about how he feels. I am an alien on earth here. Okay, and so this person, mystical traveler, feels like an alien in an alien place on earth, like so many of us feel, right? Now the light is fading fast. Chances slip away. A time will come to pass when there'll be none. Then addicted to a perfumed poison, betrayed by its aftertaste. Oh, we shall lose the wonder and find nothing in return. Many are the substitutes, but they're powerless on their own. What are you feeling here about what this means? You get it? The light is fading fast. The chances are slipping away. All of the opportunities here in our physical sphere. The time comes when there is no more chances in this lifetime. But we're addicted to a perfumed poison, which is what? Our karmic habitual behaviors and vices. But we recognize it by its poisoned aftertaste. We lose the wonder when we realize that following that, there is nothing that comes to us in return for this circular karmic behavior. There's many substitutes for what we are seeking, but they're all powerless on their own. There's nothing there. There's no substance. It's empty. This is probably one of the greatest lines in this song. Beware the fisherman who's casting out his line into a dried up riverbed. But don't try to tell him because he won't believe you. Throw some bread to the ducks instead. It's easier that way. I feel like an alien, a stranger in an alien place. Are you following? The fisherman is casting his line, and he doesn't see that it's a dried up riverbed. There's nothing there. There's nothing fruitful for him to cast towards. The trees and I are shaken by the same wind, but whereas the trees will lose their withered leaves, I just can't seem to let them loose. And they cannot refresh me, those hot winds of the south. I feel like an alien, a stranger in an alien place. Okay. So anyway, back to our person who wrote in the questioner. Two songs in particular seem to describe my understanding and acceptance of the fact that this lifetime is temporary. And what I'm looking for in the universe is not going to be found here. Duke's Travels, Duke's End seems to describe ascension from the body and an expression of frustration and defiance towards a world I don't understand and which does not understand me. Most of it is an instrumental which suggests ascension out of the body. The brief lyrics which describe frustration and defiance is as follows. I'm going to read this one and I'm going to let you do more of the work this time. I am the one who guided you. This far, all you know and all you feel. Nobody must know my name, for nobody would understand. And you kill what you fear, and you fear what you don't understand. I call you, for I must leave. You're on your own until the end. There was a choice, but now it's gone. I said you would not understand. And then he says the other song is Afterglow, which seems to describe my final exit from planet Earth towards the source that my soul is seeking. It's a rather sad tune about an individual who is suddenly left with nothing. I think the person realizes that whatever they had previously amounts to nothing, and they'll spend the rest of their time on this plane searching for the source. So that's very insightful of this person asking the questions, that this person realizes they need to be searching for God. And so again, I'm going to let you guys do most of the work as we go through some of these lyrics. Like the dust that settles all around me, I must find a new home. The ways and holes that used to give me shelter are all as one to me now, but I would search everywhere just to hear your call and walk upon stranger roads than this one in a world I used to know before. I miss you more than the sun reflecting off my pillow, bringing the warmth of new life. And the sounds that echoed all around me, I got a glimpse of in the night. But now I've lost everything. I give to you my soul. The meaning of all that I believed before escapes me in this world of none, nothing, no one. And I would search everywhere just to hear your call. A walk upon stranger roads than this one, the world I used to know before. So this is the rest of this person's thoughts. The best definition for the source I can think of is the first principle from which everything else emanates, a concept used by Jews and early Christians, influenced by Platonic philosophy. It resembles a simple DC electrical circuit. The positive side has an excess of electrons. The negative side has a drought of electrons. The electrons will travel through the circuit, performing all sorts of labor that is simply an effect of their need to return to the negative side, and they will do so until both sides of the circuit reach a state of equilibrium. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I must go through this life and perhaps more afterwards because I need to return to the source. In other news, that's a separate private question. And so we will move on with that, and we'll go to what I answered. And here we are. So let's move over to there with moving forward. I answered a lot as we were going through it, but I'll just give you a little bit more from what I answered. That was a little bit more than what I already shared with you. Okay. So I said, hey, so yes, there have been musicians and bands throughout time that have been touching into the mystical strand throughout time. You're specifically here talking about Genesis. And I mentioned in my oldest website, I had actually devoted a few pages to certain musicians who were talking about out-of-body travel in their music. I hadn't included Genesis, although they probably would have fallen into that category. I'd included some of the works of Dan Fogelberg and Yes from the 70s. And if I'd been more in depth, I could have included many more, including Kansas, Styx, Pink Floyd, and others. You know, when you look back there, Kansas was, gosh, I'm going to have to remember them right off the top of my head. Kansas had let's go with Pink Floyd, Learning to Fly, which was very akin to astral travel. Styx had, these very mystical songs like Castle Walls and lots of things like that. Mostly their album cuts, not as much their hits. Kansas had one of their biggest hits was, gosh, why can't I think of it right off the top of my head? But they had a lot of stuff that referred to the spiritual journey and the mystical path. But I wanted to point out to him a couple of other songs that were very much about out-of-body travel. And so I shared with him Yes's Close to the Edge, and then some of the things from Dan Fogelberg. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from Close to the Edge by Yes. And let's just start. And so a season could call you from the depths of your disgrace and rearrange your liver to the solid mental grace and achieve it all with music that came quickly from afar, then taste the fruit of man recorded losing all against the hour, and assessing points to nowhere, leading every single one. A dewdrop can exalt us like the music of the sun and take away the plane in which we move and choose the course you're running. Down at the edge, round by the corner, not right away, not right away, close to the edge, down by a river, not right away, not right away, cross the line around the changes of the summer, reaching out to call the color of the sky. Passed around a moment, clothed in mornings faster than we see, getting over all the time I had to worry, leaving all the changes far from far behind. We relieve the tension only to find out the master's name. Down at the end, round by the corner, close to the edge, just by a river, seasons will pass you by. Now, just before I go to the next part of the song where it's going into something else, right here, he's talking about close to the edge, down by the river. All of this stuff, there's a lot in here, but some of the basics of this are being right by the borderland between the physical vibration and the mystical vibration, between the planes of existence, going through the astral plane, going from the higher realms down into the below. And then he starts into, I get up, I get down, I get up, I get down. And that's about going up, going down. It's about astral travel, going up into the higher spheres, going down. Now that it's all over and done, now that you find, now that you're whole, my eyes convinced, eclipsed with the younger moon, attained with love, it changed as almost strained amidst clear manna from above. I crucified my hate and held the word within my hand. There's you, the time, the logic, or the reasons we don't understand. Sad courage claimed the victims standing still for all to see as armored movers approached to overlook the sea. There since the cord, the license, or the reasons we understood will be. Down at the edge, close by a river, close to the edge, round by the corner, close to the end, down by the corner, down at the edge, round by the river. A sudden call shouldn't take away the startled memory. All in all, the journey takes you all the way. And that's nowhere close to the end, but I'll just leave you with that because the lyrics to this song continue and continue. And it's a very long song, actually. I'm not sure exactly how long this song is, but Close to the Edge, check it out. Yes. And you're going to see it. It takes you through this journey where you're literally, you feel, if you even meditate with this song, you're going from above the earth into the higher, into the spheres above the astral plane. Get up, get down, I get up, I get down. I can't sing it right, but it's really cool. So hello, Adriana. Great to see you too. Thank you. And then I mentioned him that one of my favorites of all time was always Dan Fogelberg. I was a big fan of his, and he was so gifted. He wrote a couple of songs that I'm just going to point out. He wrote millions of great songs that had mystical import, but I'm just going to point out a couple that are kind of blunt. One he wrote about astral travel. It's entitled Nexus. And the other one is called Ghosts. And it's about past life memories resurfacing. So I'm just going to throw some lyrics out from those. And you're just going to see how blunt it can be. And I think that's really interesting for those who haven't noticed this yet. And, one thing I wanted to point out to my writer, and I think I did somewhere in here, that I thought it was great that he realized that he was hearing mystical language, which is great. So across the vein of night, there cuts a path of searing light, burning like a beacon on the edges of our sight. At the point of total darkness and the light's divine divide, a soul can let its shadow stretch and land on either side. Either side. Is that blunt enough for y'all? And balanced on the precipice, the moment must reveal, naked in the face of time, our race within the wheel. As we hang beneath the heavens and we hover over hell, our hearts become the instruments we learn to play so well. Wealthy the spirit that knows its own flight. Stealthy, I'm getting so slammed. Welcome, Dan Fogelberg. Stealthy the hunter who slays his own fright. Blessed the traveler who journeys the length of the light. Outside the pull of gravity, beyond the spectral veil, within our careful reasoning, we search to no avail. For the constant in the chaos, for the fulcrum in the void, following a destiny our steps cannot avoid. Across the vein of night, there cuts a path of searing light, burning like a beacon at the edges of our sight, at the point of total darkness, at the light's divine divide. A soul can let its shadow stretch and land on either side. And then, of course, it goes on to John. Thank you. John found the name of the Kansas song. I was thinking of Dust in the Wind. And you know what? I'm going to pull up some of the lyrics on that one too, because I did not pull that one up for my questioner. And you'll see what I'm talking about when I get to that. So I think you can tell how obvious this is about astral travel. Excuse me. So I love this next song that Dan Fogelberg also wrote called Ghosts. And it's about how past life memory comes to the surface of a soul. And it's called Ghosts. I said that already. Sometimes in the night, I feel it, near as my next breath, and yet untouchable. Silently, the past comes stealing, like the taste of some forbidden sweet. Along the walls in shadowed rafters, moving like a thought through haunted atmospheres. Muted cries and echoed laughter, banished dreams that never sank in sleep. Lost in love and found in reason, questions that the mind can find no answers for. Ghostly eyes conspire treason as they gather just outside the door. And every ghost that calls upon us brings another measure in the mystery. Death is there to keep us honest and constantly remind us we are free. Down the ancient corridors and through the gates of time, run the ghosts of days that we've left behind. And wow, am I feeling the presence of Mr. Fogelberg. Okay, you got to help me out here. Down the ancient corridors and through the gates of time run the ghosts of dreams that we left behind. Sometimes in the night I feel it, near as my next breath and yet untouchable. Silently the past comes stealing like the taste of some forbidden sweet. And every ghost that calls upon us brings another measure in the mystery. Death is there to keep us honest and constantly remind us we are free. And it goes on as well. And so there is another one that you can see just how we had artists, and we had a lot of them. I think I wrote that here. I said, it's interesting that in the 70s, we had a few bands who really caught on to the mystical strand, and some in the 80s, and then it slowly waned, and we don't see it that much anymore. But, there are still some artists out there, probably some I don't know about, and there are some artists as well that were not in the mainstream, people like Lorena McKennitt and Enya, who were not mainstream artists, Secret Garden, people who did other kinds of music as well, all kinds of interesting artists who came about. But there's probably artists I don't know about who have done this as well in the modern world. But we definitely see in the mainstream that a lot of music does not do this like we saw in the 70s and maybe into the early 80s. But we do see this throughout history in music. We've seen it in classical music and in other genres of music, where there were always artists who touched into the transcendent. And so, I felt that it was really good that this person who reached out to me was able to actually recognize that in this music and realize there was this value in it. So I said, just remember, although you feel like you don't belong here, you're here because you do, even if it's just for a short time. So make good use of that time. I think a lot of people feel like an alien to this world. I feel that way all the time. So you're not alone. I hear about a lot of people who feel that way. I think people who enter into a spiritual journey, that's a very common thing to feel that way. You know what I mean? And then I believe we had a few more here. So yes. So another thing that in reply, lately I've had a rather intense, let him respond here. He said, wow, Marilyn, this is amazing. Yes, you are certainly welcome to discuss anything I've written in the live stream. A copy of Close to the Edge and You and I is in my truck, along with CDs from other progressive rock bands. When I listen to this tune, I feel like it is describing the person who suddenly understands all knowledge while in a mystical journey, something you have experienced. Person sees clearly how everything in the universe marches towards a state of equilibrium. You could say they are getting hit by the train of Akashic records. Rick Wakeman's incredible keyboards magnify the effect of the lyrics, as Tony Banks does in Genesis. Metamorphosis from Curved Air is another good one that discusses mystical experiences. So I have not heard that one. So something you can check out, I guess. He says, I'm currently listening to Dan's songs you mentioned, and they are really good. So much great music to explore and so little time. Another thing, lately I've had a rather intense, but not overwhelming or unpleasant electronic buzzing noise in my mind. I hear it with my mind rather than my ears, if that makes any sense. It seems most intense in the evening before I go to bed, but I can pick up on it anytime if I pay attention. I had this an awful lot when I was a child. I didn't tell my parents about it because I feared they would take me to the doctor who would give me shots. When I try to imagine what it is exactly, it strikes me as heightened electrical activity in my head, similar to a Tesla coil. If it were possible to connect a multimeter to my brain, it would read a charge, which I know is physiologically possible. I know my mind has been considerably more active over the past few years, as I engage in mystical and spiritual topics more and more. Any thoughts? So here we are. That sounds like you're touching more into the sounds of higher planes. You may be getting ready to have more out-of-body experiences or paranormal sensitivity. And the response is, yes, that is what I think is slowly building for me. I remember when I first began corresponding with you, it was because I felt the incredible pull of mystical energy one evening at my grandparents' farm, and this force has been drawing me towards it ever since. I still feel an intense pull towards places and things which have energies of the past. There's an old storefront I passed by on my way home from work called Flannery's Grocery. And then he goes into a long story about that. Okay, and then here's what I wanted to share here, because I think this is something that is very universal. I think the main obstacle for me making progress here is still my vice of sexual lust, which I have described to you before. I'm still fighting it, and it's not easy. Don't cheat on my wife, engage in sexual harassment or anything like that. Rather, it just occupies way too much in my mind. I don't feel compelled to address this because modern fundamentalist Christianity purity culture tells me this is wrong. It's because the Holy Spirit has convicted me. I know that engaging in lust is keeping my spirit from making progress. It's a fetter which keeps me chained to life on imperfect planet Earth. I don't really know any way to address this other than attempt to fill my mind with godly things and focus on my spiritual abilities. I feel like I'm making slow progress here. I'm actually reading the Bible and other religious texts every day for truly the first time in my life. Maybe everyone struggles with this, even if they don't want to admit it. After all, most folks seem to have a vice that they keep coming back to. Well, anyway, I feel like this sojourn is going well for the most part. My best friend's younger brother is also a Christian who's interested in esoteric and mystical matters. We discuss these things an awful lot. He has an interest in Edgar Cayce and other early 20th century mystical figures. And so that's kind of where we leave off there. And I said, well, you express it well. And don't be too hard on yourself, because this struggle of lust is universal and it goes on throughout our lives and is most intense in the younger years, only fading just a bit as you get older. But even then, as my former priest who passed away would say, you are tempted until 20 minutes after death. LOL. So it is never entirely gone. It's part of our human nature. The fact that you are aware of it is excellent. So what it does, however, is provide us with a lot of distraction. And your response to it is excellent in that you're engaging in spiritual practices, reading, etc., in spite of it. So that's very good work. So rather than focusing on that it's there, you just use the discipline, refocus on something else that's more fruitful for you. And so there we have it. Long question from one of our readers. So everybody is here. We could just take a quick look at Dust in the Wind. Let me pull that up because that has some fantastic lyrics as well. Let's see if I can find them quickly for y'all. Okay, yeah, this one is a quick read. I close my eyes only for a moment, and the moment's gone. All my dreams pass before my eyes, a curiosity, dust in the wind. All they are is dust in the wind. Same old song, just a drop of water in an endless sea. All we do crumbles to the ground, though we refuse to see. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. Now don't hang on. Nothing lasts forever but the earth and sky. It slips away, and all your money won't another minute buy. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. Everything is dust in the wind. So there you have it there. So moving on to our next question. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions. This one is a little bit of a long one too, so I want you to get a chance to jump in. All right, here we go. Hi, Marilyn, wishing you tons of strength in your steady services. I got a question about Jesus. Lately, I've been rereading, cross-referencing, and synthesizing your work Andre Luis Chico Javier's series of books, and the Law of One book. The Law of One gives some specific information about Jesus, and I have read your many interactions with Jesus too. As I'm not a skilled adept like you are, I'm wondering if you may give your thoughts and potentially a conversation with Jesus about that. I know that's a big ask, and I don't expect a response unless there is some spiritual weight that I cannot even grasp or realize with my intentions, but to my surface level understandings, the synthesis would improve my outlook and certainly help others who are either Christian or against Christianity bridge the gap. These others would likely be only a few who have read your work and or the Law of One. Below is the link to the specific session in the Law of One that speaks about Jesus, specifically what happened in his childhood that propelled him to remember his mission and the occurrence at the cross. I feel like this information opens up a whole facet of Jesus of Nazareth, remembering Jesus Christ. Take care, and thank you for your work, for bringing so much guidance from loving and wise ones into writing for people like me. Okay. All right. Looks like we have a question in the chat room, which we will get to as well. So let's go here. So my response, we're going to try to stay in sequence here, but I will try to zip through this too. So, well, there was a lot in there that I thought was very important. Firstly, that forgiveness is what overrides karma, and the point made about seniority by vibration. We have a super chat. Thank you, John, so much for that. He says, loving this podcast, reviewing questions is always very interesting. Dust in the Wind always felt like a very significant song, much more than just a tune on the radio. Thank you, Marilyn. Oh, you're welcome. I used to really jam that one out on my cassette tape. I think it eventually melted in my van because I liked it that much. In my 1992 van, eventually within 10 years melted, by the time the cassette tapes were out of use. But I played that over and over. So thank you so much for that super chat. Super chats help us to keep our materials free to everyone in the world. So thank you so much, John, for that. And we will deal with your question, Aniel, here in just a minute. So thank you so much for your question. So I was mentioning that there are 2 points in here that I thought were important from this reading that this reader gave me. That one was that forgiveness is what overrides karma. And then there was a point made about seniority by vibration. And the quote is, the seniority by vibration is the preferential treatment, shall we say, which follows the ways of the Law of One, which encourages harvestable individuals, each individual becoming aware of the time of harvest and the need on a self level to bend mind, body, and spirit towards the learned teaching of these lessons is given priority in order that this entity may have the best possible chance, shall we say, of succeeding in this attempt. Basically, what the Law of One reading is saying is that people are given seniority by their vibration and by their likelihood of actually benefiting from the experience for those that are less likely to actually make the change and for it to be fruitful when there is that kind of thing. So I said, but I know you were most interested in the comments made on Christ. So a few mentions were made, none of great consequence, but I'll make a few comments on them. It spoke first about how Jesus learned to heal through densities. It says, quote, the gate to intelligent infinity can only be opened when an understanding of the instreamings of intelligent energy are opened unto the healer. These are the so-called natural laws of your local space-time continuum and its web of electromagnetic sources or nexi of instreaming energy. Knowing then, first the mind and the body, then as the spirit is integrated and synthesized, those are harmonized into a mind-body-spirit complex which can move among the spirit dimensions and which can open the gateway to intelligent infinity, thus healing self by light and sharing that light with others. Unquote. And then it makes a point that Jesus realized that he had a power within him when he, quote, accidentally killed another child when he was a kid. They called it his ability to, quote, penetrate intelligent infinity, unquote, which turned to a distortion of anger. They say that the entity was touched by the entity, unquote, and received a fatal wound. And he decided to learn to use that for good instead, that anger. The lost books of the Bible account disputes this rendition of events. There's a historical counting of what may have actually happened in the lost books of the Bible. The infancy gospel of Thomas, and there was more than one instance of this in these books. Jesus got angry at another little child who ran into him and he cursed him. And that child was struck dead. He got angry at one of his teachers. He cursed him, and that teacher was struck very ill. There are accountings of Jesus cursing several teachers who did not meet his standards. Teachers were afraid to take him on as a student, as a child. However, at the same time, at the very self-same time, he was performing miracles of healing as a child, raising of the dead. He rose the son of a young mother from the dead, and even making birds out of clay, which he brought to life. So these things were all happening at the same time. He was already working with both the positive and negative poles of these energies, so to speak. In this book, it says that after he found a humble teacher who understood who he was, quote, the young child laughed greatly and said, "Now let those bear fruit that were barren, great that are thine, and let them see that they were blind in heart. I am come from above that I may curse them and call them to the things that are above, even as he commanded, which hath sent me for your sakes." And when the young child ceased speaking, immediately all they were made whole, which had come under his curse. And no man after that durst provoke him, lest he should curse him and he should be maimed, unquote. Now, I know you were hoping for me to make this a little bit easier to understand rather than harder, but this brings up one of the most controversial books in the Christian histories, the Infancy Gospels. So there it is, something that greatly disturbed me when I read it 30 years ago. I see it today more with just a sense of mystery. So in the Law of One, it states that the experience humbled and galvanized Jesus. Whereas in the historical account, it states a very different viewpoint. It indicates that Jesus was teaching the people obedience to God, and he got it. In the Law of One, it states that Jesus will not return in the sense of a second coming, only to speak through a, quote, channeler, unquote. This to me is suspect, as we know that Jesus has been appearing to saints, mystics, and sages, prophets, as well for hundreds of years. So we know that he returns in this way too, for sure. Whether he makes a physical return is yet to be seen, but because Jesus has spoken to many other great souls and has told them that he will, we cannot totally disregard that just because of this particular one. However, don't take my thoughts on that as a criticism of this one, because I found the short reading very interesting and on point. It's never good to forget, though, that God speaks to others, not just to us, and that we are all capable of misunderstanding, misinterpretation. So we have to always respect the body of knowledge that is out there. We know that Christ comes again every time he returns to another soul, awakens within them, so to speak. He comes again every time he communicates or appears to another soul. But will he come again in the flesh? We don't know for sure, because there are conflicting revelations regarding this event. My experience has shown that Christ resides over the higher spheres and is who he said he is. But we also know there is this Christ consciousness, but that could be akin to universal consciousness, cosmic consciousness. Many things come together into the one in these concepts, but as to how they will emanate, we do not entirely know. And so the response from the questioner was, "Thank you for your detailed response. I haven't seen this material about the infancy gospels. I totally see your point on the two meanings of will come again. And the second one, Christ consciousness, being akin to what Ra refers to in this Law of One writing as the, quote, harvest from third to fourth density. I have been quite deep into the Law of One to the point where I had a crazy OBE in the beingness. And a few others where they were looking at me, but everything was way too bright for me to see. One of these days, I'd love to hear or read your thoughts and possible OBEs on the book. Thank you so much for taking the time to respond thoughtfully. And I said, what I've read so far has resonated very much with what I've experienced in the mystical planes, and your experience also validates to me that what you're reading is touching into a real spiritual embodiment and place. And of course, I'm also not infallible. And to be fair, even as regards the infancy gospels, these are written by human hands and thus written potentially from a grounded perspective. Sorry, I've got something there. Okay. Whereas the book you are reading may have a higher frequency understanding of the same events. We don't know. I'd have to read more of it to be sure about about this particular thing. I just checked out their website, read a bit about the founders, the channel. They seem to have a nice energy and they're giving everything away. What do you think about it? And the questioner said, honestly, I think about concepts from that book every single day, several times a day. I spend most of my thoughts making cross comparisons to other works, including my own experiences, not to point out discrepancies, which is an exercise in itself to appreciate variations, interpretations, perspectives, reasons for possible flaws, but to bridge a framework of understanding. It's like an amorphous cytoskeletal structure that constantly reorganizes. Ha ha ha. On its own, the book has some intense depth. I've read it twice over, and it reveals more and more. And you can see the undercurrent of assistance while respecting the questioner's free will. One particular comparison that's more advanced in their material and directly relevant to your Mysteries of the Redemption book, which I'm currently rereading cover to cover, is between their original system and your shared experience of mind, body, spirit complex transformations. It's like they give the philosophical concepts along with their processes, while you gave the lived experiences of going through these processes. And the first dozen sessions contain a lot of peripheral questions, but the last dozen are extremely deep. So he goes on, and basically we talked about how he's thinking about possibly doing a comparative of those books along with a whole group of maybe 8 or 10 others, which would be very interesting. And so I encouraged him to consider doing that. But I want to get to your questions here too. So let's do that. So if you have any further questions on that question, please feel free to pop it in there if I didn't cover it well. So Anna Yells asks, my guardians shared that Om was the key to free me after clearing abused, shackled, past life me's held in my heart, sent to the light. The Om lifted me out of body. Yogananda, I believe, shares this. Wow, that's a beautiful experience, Anna Yell. Thank you for sharing it. Yes, and so that's beautiful. Beautiful. So, I've had some beautiful experiences myself about the Om as well. And so it's just, continually confirming that is something to utilize in our mystical experiences for sure. Adriana, can I ask your thoughts in regards to DNA activations? New Age community seems to offer this type of energy healing. Any thoughts? I don't have really much thoughts. I've looked into them, tried to understand exactly what they're trying to do. And I probably just should say I don't have an opinion because I haven't really been able to figure out what the point of them actually is. But let me see what the rest of you're saying. I read a book called In His Arms of a 9-year-old girl who went to a diabetic coma and died. In her book, she described seeing parts of Jesus's life, that he made a bird out of clay and gave life to the bird. Yes, that's true. She also described that Jesus traveled to England, the town of Glastonbury. Yep. After the clearing, my vibration increased. Oh, okay, that's a separate. In the book, she described seeing parts of Jesus's life in Glastonbury. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of different accountings of Jesus's travels, And Glastonbury is one of those locations. And there's also some indication that it's possible that the Blessed Mother might have gone back to England after the crucifixion. There's also evidence indicating they might have gone to India. It's really hard to know exactly what the truth is because there's legitimate evidence in both cases. In the case of the India, there is the legitimate possibility that it was Thomas because Thomas was considered to be almost like Jesus's twin. They looked so much alike. And there's a lot in the literature about that it's possible that it was one of the other apostles and it might have been Thomas because he looked so much like him. But there's also, the legends and the actual locations of different tombs that are, that were located for Mary and Mary Magdalene on the way to India or back. And you also have the same thing outside of somewhere around Glastonbury in England, and also off the coast of France, where for Mary Magdalene. So it's really hard to know exactly because there's evidence pointing to a lot of different locations in terms of after the crucifixion. But yeah, so that's true. That's in the infancy gospels about the bird out of clay and bringing life to the bird. That's so that's very interesting. That's very interesting. In terms of the DNA activations, I'd be interested in what you think about them, Adriana. I don't really understand what they're trying to do with them, and I've tried to understand what they are for. And so probably I don't have an opinion on them, I guess is what I'd say. If you're led mystically to them, or then I would, or you feel very drawn to them, then I would take that into consideration, because that's each of us is called in a different direction for different reasons. You know what I mean? And so for some, I just have not been drawn in that direction. I've looked at them, looked them up, tried to get a sense of what they were all about, but they didn't make sense to me anyway. And maybe they're just kind of touching into vibrational raisings and just trying to call it something else. It's hard to know. So that could be. So Aniel, continuing with her experience, after clearing my vibration increased with Om, and I came out. Because of past lives and fear, they were working with me slowly. Do you have a mantra statement while out to get a higher thrust, to go to higher increased speed? One thing was the bringing your hands together, your fingers like this, with each fingertip coming together. It'll increase the vibration by like 5 times or more. That's what they would always have me do. Trying to remember if there was any actual statement. Usually when you're in that space, you're not really able to speak anyway. It's more of energetic. And so they would always have me do this and do it slowly as I'm doing it here, one at a time. And as you do that, it's like increasing by multiple times the vibration. And that's how I would be instructed to do it. Adriana was listening to this lady. Her name is Tina Louise Spalding, who says that channels Jesus. I was listening to her Course in Miracles. I was listening to her Course in Miracles. She says incredible things. Then one of her channels, Jesus said he was not a Messiah. Well, I would just state that when you say, why would Jesus say such a thing? I just don't believe it. And I would agree with you, Adriana. I'm not sure where she's getting at with that, honestly, because Messiah means deliverer. And he was that. And in all the, I guess I'll try not to, I have to remember and remind myself too, I'm not infallible either, but in all the experiences that I've had, I've been shown that Christ is who he said he was, and he was a Messiah. Um, and so I'm not sure what she's saying he was instead. But no, Jesus was not. So I don't know. I have. I don't know. I mean, you probably have to take a look at the Course in Miracles and take it with a grain of salt. See how you feel about it. I started reading it recently again. I tried reading it years ago, and then I started reading it again, and I would just say that I have mixed feelings about it. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that okay, you stopped it. And if someone says, I guess, here's the difficulty that you always have to do with discernment. If someone is saying, I'm channeling Jesus, or I'm talking to Saint Michael every day, then you really have to go into some higher level discernment. And I have to be careful with that too, because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because I've had these experiences, I've shared them, where I've seen these beings. I don't see them every single day. It's a special occurrence. And so, the question I would ask is, anytime someone says they're channeling Jesus, be like, well, why would Jesus be doing that? It's kind of like the same theme, with the Ouija boards. People are like, oh, what's the big deal about a Ouija board? And it's like, well, who's going to respond to a Ouija board? You think the celestial hierarchy responds to Ouija boards, or do you think wandering spirits and lost souls respond to Ouija boards? And at worst, something worse. It's not the celestial hierarchy or angels who respond to Ouija boards, And so you always have to ask the question of what is the motivation there. And I guess with I think one of the things I had difficulty with, I don't know what to make of the Course in Miracles, so I guess I don't have a real opinion about that either. So are there a lot of, okay, Adriana says there are a lot of people, so many people claiming to be channeling Jesus. So I didn't know that. I've heard of a few. Generally, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. For that very reason, I guess. For that very reason. And Adriana says the motivation is money and selling books, honestly. Well, it might be. I can't imagine that they're making a ton of money selling books either, but I don't know. But Anna Yale says, in your recent podcast, you were talking about the John Lennon incident, where he hadn't died in that parallel universe. It made me wonder about Jesus and his life in parallel universes, his life. Well, it's an interesting question. I don't have any magical answers. I guess the big answer that I would, if you're really interested in that, the one book I would take a look at that I had not just one, but many mind-blowing experiences about, was the Urantia book. And I was taken into the high celestial heavens, and I was shown by a group of high celestial hierarchies to read this book. And I read it from cover to cover because of the experience, where I was the exploding heavens kind of experience. It was so majestic. and it was the Urantia book. And they do talk about Jesus and how he exists in the universal spheres. And if you're interested in that question, I would probably go to the Urantia book more than others. And that's only me because of the experiences that I had about it. And then I actually read it, and it made sense, and it coincided with my own experiences and with all my other reading and my other research. And so I would go with that before I would go with these other things. And, none of this is in any way to criticize one or another. I just I just can't give an opinion on something or someone that I don't know enough about, So let's see. Yeah. So Aniel says, don't know if that makes sense. Just made me think of it and what happened to him there. Yeah. And I think that what you're going to find in the Urantia book is what the way that they describe, they will speak about Jesus as Michael of Nebadon in the Urantia book. And that is him as the universal sun reigning over this series of universes. And that's his parallel existences in more of a mystical sphere rather than parallel lives on earth, because it's less relevant for Jesus because he was who he said he was, and he was different, so if you kind of want to get a better sense of that, you can do that with that. Adriana said, I go straight to the point. Thank you, Marilyn, for your honesty. Thank you for appreciating my honesty. I think it's just real important to reiterate, I'm not criticizing anyone else's stuff. I just can't speak to it if I don't know enough about it, Aniel got that and going to read that again. I have thought about picking it up and reading it again because I read it probably about 20 years now ago. Aniel says, had it for years, yes, and I've wondered about Christ Michael. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting book, and because those were some of the really, really, really there is a gradation of experiences that I have, and these were among those pinnacle experiences, the ones that I had telling me about the Urantia book and meeting the celestial angels who told me to read it. And I'm pointing over there because that's where it is. But so I'll never forget it because it was among those pinnacle experiences, and it was among the experience that I had where the mysteries of the redemption played out before me and stuff. And so there is a gradation in the experiences that I will have. And that was one of the experiences that was one of the higher gradations. And so that's why I gave it such high priority at the time, Adrian, I love your cat. Yeah, that's Binkles. Little Binkles. Yeah, we talked about rereading it, and I may be considering doing that. One of the things about the Urantia book to me, years ago in Galactica, I wrote about the galactic ancient sacred texts, and I do feel like the Urantia book is one of those. And so when I'm feeling like this longing for something greater than that which we have on Earth, I'm thinking, gosh, where are those galactic texts? I really want to get my hands on those. I'll think about the Urantia book because it is really, one of the few, if among the only, that I really know of anyway, that we have access to on Earth. That is, there he is. There's Binkles, that we have access to here. So I hope that was helpful. I would just be very cautious, always discerning. And that, that's, it is a difficult thing. There's a lot of people who are having experiences. There's also a lot of people who are reporting visions of Christ. I've heard about a lot of those. We just have to be discerning about all of them. But some of these things are true, legitimate things that are happening. And so, uh, you know, what can we say? Adriana says, I started reading the Urantia book, but stopped. So I'll go back to read for my next reading. Okay. Yeah. It's hard to read because it's intense reading and stuff, but definitely worth it, I think. Aniel, I feel God puts those in our path. Now I know why. And you've had your experiences. Yep. That's true. That's true. And so I guess we should probably work towards wrapping this one up. Any more questions before we head on out? And I think I'm trying to come up with something to put out there regarding these channelings that you might be referring to, Adriana, because I just don't know so much about them all. I think that Paul Calabro asks, is Urantia similar to the Law of One books? I would say no. Very different. Urantia is pretty much kind of stands on its own, really. There's nothing like it out there. It kind of stands on its own. So, it was written in the early 1900s and supposedly brought in by galactic beings, has a lot of, oh, you're very welcome, Paul. He says, thank you. There's all these papers. It's a very, very in-depth book. And it was put together by a group of people that compiled all the work of this anonymous person who received these revelations. So John says, didn't you have an experience validating the first two books, but not so much the last two? What I had was definitely the importance of the first section, which is all about the hierarchies of the angels, and that was the most important part of it. And that the Urantia book, like all ancient texts and all texts, is not infallible. It's not flawless. There were errors made too in that, just like all of the writings. Those of us who receive are never incapable. We're not infallible. And so we receive these experiences or these messages, and one of the things that is so important when we do this work is just that realization that we are capable of misinterpretation, mistranslation, and that we have the humility to recognize that we're just trying to bring something from up here to down here, and that it's possible that things will get slightly askew on their way. And so what I had indicated that the person who brought it in had some of his own biases and things that found their way into the Urantia book. One of them was about reincarnation, that he did not personally believe in reincarnation, and that came into the book. I'm not remembering right off the bat what the other one was, but it's in the Mysteries of the Redemption, I think, what it was. But so we all have these biases. So we don't really want to, we want to be very careful and very humble about the fact that even those who are trying to bring in work and stuff, that their intentions are often usually good, even if something might get slightly off, or we want to always assume, oh, there you go. Aniel says the dark realms not given, the lower realms. Aniel, That might have been, yeah, I think that's what it was, that he did not recognize that there is the dark side, the evil. And that was something that he was not comfortable with dealing with. Something I've written a lot about in my books is that none of us should ever claim to know something about something we have not seen. And so let's go back to Adriana's question about DNA activation. I don't know what it is exactly. I've read about it, tried to understand what they're doing. I don't get it. So I don't have an opinion because I don't really know what they're doing. It's never been shown to me as something that was important, but I'm not sure if what they're doing is literally just kind of like a different name for one of these things that we've already been doing, vibrational raisings, frequency alterations, transformational, things. And this is one of the things I've seen over the last, almost 40 years, where people put new names on old things. And then you're like, okay, what are you talking about? Are you just talking about this and you just got a new name for it? Or is this something different? And we just don't always know right off the bat. Adriana says, another channeler I heard say that Moses was tricked by the devil and God did not give the 10 commandments. Really? What a lie. Well, that one is interesting because that one comes out as pretty easy to discern as, this person is really being, you really want to look for what would the dark side do. The dark side is going to try to turn things around, turn things backward, make good evil and evil good, and so you have to always look at these things. And confusion, you want to confuse people. And so if the devil gave Moses the 10 commandments, then does that mean that all those things are now evil, to not kill people? What I mean? So you can see how this one is kind of an easier discernment because it's so blatant. Let's see what else she said. Another channel said that love yourself. This is the first commandment. But the first commandment is to love God. The second is to love your neighbor. Now, Adriana, that is an excellent one you've pointed out here. What you're doing here is excellent because here we are talking about discernment. And, we recently just put out this new class on spiritual warfare, angels, and demons. And a great part of this class is discernment. And this is exactly it. If you read the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, the first law is love thyself and do as thou wilt. So there's your discernment on that one. So they're they're literally turning things backwards, inside out. So let's see. Adriana says, I think it's just an energy chakra balance, just another name. Okay, so the DNA activation is about balancing your energy chakras. Okay. And that's something that if you go through the out-of-body travel experiences, that stuff happens of its own accord. It's a natural part of the experiences. So what can get confusing is when people start trying to give all these different names to things and try to make it all complicated when it's really not. Okay, Adriana says it was Sam the Illusionist. He actually had a lot of great, interesting stuff. And then this thing about Moses. Now, if you read in like the Dialogues of the Devils by Reverend John McGowan, he speaks about, and also, a lot of writers in spiritual warfare, in exorcism and all these things is, the whole goal of the demonic is going to be to give you enough true things that they can throw in one very untrue thing just to get it in there. So if he's saying a lot of neat things and then all of a sudden he says, but the 10 commandments are all false, they came from Satan, then and you're like, oh, but everything else he said was cool. So that must be cool too. Then that's a major win for the dark side, you see. So that's really sneaky. And that is one of the techniques of the demons. Read the Bible, Marilyn, and I love the Bible, Adriana says. Aniel says, I'm really enjoying your podcasts. I'm reading the Mystic Knowledge series along with the Angel Demon podcast. It helped me in my recent OBE when the little boy morphed. I commanded him to be gone in Jesus' name, and I was immediately out of his presence. Good. Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that, Aniel. That is fantastic. This discernment thing is so pivotal. And so I encourage all of you to participate in that Spiritual Warfare Angels and Demons class. And there will be a documentary film on it as well, where we can realize, spiritual warfare is not just when you're having these massive battles against the demons. It starts with all of this that we're talking about. That's spiritual warfare. It's what you recognize today, Adriana, here with how this these little things that have been slipped in as untruths that become really insidious seeds of darkness that can be very destructive and harmful to souls. And so I'm really impressed by the things you brought in here, because this is just wow. So this other channel says, love yourself. This is the first commandment. And if you know anything, and so this is part of the problem, is that many people have not studied as much. And, I've been very blessed in that because of what God has asked me to do, I've had the time and the resources to, study all these things. And they may not know that the Satanic Bible, the very first commandment is love thyself and do as thou wilt. So they won't look at that and say, well, duh, you know what I mean? They won't see that, but you saw it, and you saw it because you're also doing that work. And you understood the first commandment is to love God, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so this whole idea that, our society is love yourself. Well, loving ourselves without loving our neighbors is very empty and vacant and very void. It's not the same thing as loving our neighbor as ourself, and loving God above all else. Because what happens when we do that, there's energy that comes in, energy of the light that comes in. Loving God is an action, a motion of energy. Loving our neighbors as ourself brings energy in. But loving thyself and doing as thou wilt is a parasitic act. It's a completely different thrust. And so just even getting those little falsehoods in can completely screw up the thrust energetically of a person's life. And so excellent things that you guys have pointed out here. Adriana says, yes, thank you for the new podcast series. I'm still listening on it yet. I'm still trying to get them up. We're having some issues with uploading, so bear with me, but we're getting there. Aniel, I'm recognizing the demons of the common man. Excellent. Yes. And I want to be the monk. Me too. Adriana, poison food for rats is small and mixed with lots of good food. Excellent point. That's so true. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining me. This has been fantastic. Love you all so much. I'm really, really pleased with these realizations here. This is great. And so, let's have these realizations in love, recognize that a lot of times we're all capable of being deceived. And even those who are receiving these things, we don't know what their intentions are. It's all we want to put out prayers for anyone who might be being deceived and doing so unintentionally. So we don't want to be judgmental of that, we want to pray for everyone to receive the truth and not to be deceived, because we are all so easily, we so easily fall under the trap of these dialogues of the devils. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Screw Tape Letters, which is basically how the demons screw with us. And every one of us is so easily screwed with. So we want to remember to pray for one another and always assume that the intentions of others are good, and that everyone is truly seeking the truth. But we are all, we can all be deceived. None of us is infallible, and we could all be wrong, and so we always want to remember that loving kindness to one another, because that actually also diffuses the tricks and all those things as well. Adriana says, thank you, love you all. Aniel, 3 hearts. The new rosary, Aniel, yes. Aniel sent me, there is a new rosary. Let me pull that up. Adriana says, sometimes I feel guilty for even listening, but I am searching for answers, and I tell myself that God understands my pure intentions. I think those people don't even know they are deceived sometimes. Oh, I think that's the case. And let us never lose the humble knowledge that we don't know. We're not the ultimate arbiter of truth either. We just do the best we can to discern ourselves. And yes, I believe that most people who are seeking truth are wanting, the real truth. But there's all kinds of things that get in the way of it. And we are all, we're all easily deceived, It can happen to any of us, is what I'm saying, I guess. Aniel says, told Daddy about selfishness versus selflessness today. And, that's going back to my near-death experience with Jesus, where Jesus told me that was the purpose of our lives on earth, is to go from selfishness to selflessness. And that is another great instrument of discernment, is utilizing, is this selfish or selfless? That's one thing. And Aniel, let me see if I can grab what you sent me here. The Rosary to Blind Satan. You had sent me, and it is a rosary. Feel free to. I'm going to try to pull it up here, but the Flame of Love Rosary, and it has something added to it that is supposed to blind Satan. Do you remember what that is, Aniel? If you do, YouTube Journey Deeper. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, but it doesn't just come right up. So it's hard to, let's see, where is the, well, it's not just coming right up. So I may need you to either jump on in and tell me what it is, or, let's see, Rosary Prayer Room, the Flame of Love Rosary. And it is now live streaming. I don't know why it's not coming up there on Yell. Sorry about that. Well, I'm on the live stream. It's just that, it's the new part of the rosary isn't just right there. You've got to go through all this other stuff to get to it. Do you know what that new part is, Aniel? Do you want to share it before we close this out? Or I'm waiting for it to come up here, but I don't know how long it's going to take for it to come up. It's not in the information below. So it looks like there is, okay, I'm not going to be able to find it. I can give people the website. It's flameoflove.us. I'm going to go ahead and put it in here for everybody. The course, Adrienne is asking about the course. It's Spiritual Warfare, Angels and Demons. It's on the YouTube channel right now. And not all of it's uploaded, but I'm working on it. We're getting there. And Aniel is mentioning the Flame of Love Rosary, which has a new prayer added from a Marian apparition. You can go to flameoflove.us to learn more about this this devotion. And I'm trying. It says the flame blinds Satan, causing him to lose his power over persons and situations. This allows people to respond to God's graces and be sanctified. Through the flame, this is Jesus to Elizabeth Kindleman. Through the flame of love of the Blessed Virgin, faith will take root in souls, and the face of the earth will be renewed, because nothing like it has happened ever since the Word became flesh. The renewal of the earth, although flooded with sufferings, will come about by the power of intercession of the Blessed Virgin. Okay, and so this is Elizabeth Kindleman, who lived from 1913 to 1985. Looks like she has a diary. I haven't heard of her before, so this is very interesting. And I don't know anything more about like what her status is with the church or anything like that. Yeah, in the last of the Hail Mary, spread, is that what it is there, Aniel? Spread the effective grace of thy flame of love over all humanity now and at the hour of our death. That's what it was. That's what we wanted. So Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, spread the effective grace of thy flame of love over all humanity now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So if you want to learn more about that, flameoflove.us. I might get the diary. So thanks for that, Aniel. Very good. Thank you all for joining me. Make sure to subscribe. Please, like the video, like all our videos on the site. All that stuff really helps us not only become searchable, but to show up on YouTube and around the internet, which is something we're having trouble with because we're a little bit just not showing up. And then also, if you can, become a member. So check the join button to see what levels of membership are available. That helps us to keep things available for free. And so we would so appreciate that. So again, we will just end with another Hail Mary with this flame of love. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, spread the effect of grace of thy flame of love over all humanity now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Love y'all.